Known for directing lighthearted comedies like Clerks and Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back, Kevin Smith first made the move to horror with his controversial 2011 thriller Red State, loosely based on the exploits of real-life pastor Fred Phelps. To the surprise and perhaps dismay of his established fan base, Smith's second foray into the genre is just as abstract, if not difficult to talk about. The best way to describe it in words is to quote Smith himself, "Just like the human centipede, but cuddlier." While there is nothing remotely cuddly or warm about this film, it did generate genuine feelings of disgust, awkwardness, and, need I say, candid terror. The things I typically associate with a horror film. The idea for the film came from a podcast created by Smith and friend Scott Mosier, producer of such films as Chasing Amy and Dogma. At the end of the podcast, in which Smith discusses a disturbing ad where a lonely recluse offers free room and board in exchange for an odd request, Smith asked his audience if they would be interested in seeing the idea translate into film. An overwhelming majority tweeted #WalrusYes. Little did they know that Smith was serious, a fact that he further drills into his fans by including a section of the podcast during the film's end credits. Tusk, the first film in a proposed trilogy that features Canadian lore, follows over-eccentric podcaster Wallace Brighton as he treks to Manitoba for a planned interview. When the event goes south, Wallace has to dig deep to find a story, and discovers it in the form of a personal ad pinned to the wall of a bar bathroom. Making the 2-hour drive, Wallace meets the writer, an aging seafarer with an affinity for walruses, face to face. Howard Howe, played by the always fascinating Michael Parks, starts delving into old stories about his past, as Wallace slowly begins to descend into unconsciousness thanks to a powerful sedative. As Wallace drifts in and out of his deep sleep, he realizes with terror that parts of his body are changing. This part is sewn to here, that part over there. You get the gist. Without venturing into spoiler territory, I can honestly say that I really haven't seen another movie like it. Like most of the people who saw the film probably were, I was familiar with the podcast, which actually laid out the details of the film scene for scene. I guess there was a part of me that wanted to see just how far Smith would go. In terms of the payoff, I was not disappointed. Smith delivers on his premise. This is a case in which the execution might actually play out as well as the concept. Smith has proclaimed that he isn't known for his visual style, a generalization that's followed him around since his early Clerks days. Horror, in contrast, is mostly a visual genre, and Kevin is mostly known for his dialogue-heavy breaking down of pop culture. Just the idea of what Tusk is resonated with me as a horror fan, but also wanting to see Smith develop into a different kind of director. Just as the Justin Long character transforms from one version of existence to another, Smith is using this film, maybe more so than Red State, to transform himself into another type of filmmaker. The first 20 minutes of the film are typically what one would come to expect from a Kevin Smith flick. A ton of witty, rapidly spoken dialogue that makes you both think and bust a gut. As much as Smith has been known to love Canada, he pokes fun at it in a way that us Americans can enjoy, while simultaneously pointing out what happens when the shoe's on the other foot. The music here really helps. The standout example is where Long finally drives up to Park's home, obviously located in the middle of nowhere, and we're treated to the instrumental of Fleetwood Mac's Tusk. It builds up the tension perfectly. Anyone who knows horror understands that once the stupid, egotistical American enters that house, he's not coming home. The performances are really solid. That being said, there are some exchanges of dialogue that go on for far too long. On occasion, Smith tries to offset this by accompanying some of Park's odd stories with grainy film footage of the seafarer as a young lad, but it doesn't help the pacing. In the case of Parks, it helps to define his character because deep down, we know that he has villainous intentions. There's also a sense that he's making a lot of this stuff up to entrance his victim. The one questionable character in the film is an experienced, if not slightly off-kilter Quebec detective, Guy Lapointe, played by an almost unrecognizable Johnny Depp. Lapointe is the go-to authority who spends the movie trying to solve Wallace's sudden disappearance by analyzing Howe's consistent patterns. He speaks with a heavy French accent that is almost always hard to take seriously, and yet, oddly enough, it feels like Depp is portraying the character with serious conviction. It's as if a cartoon character is trying to break out into our reality. It's interesting to watch, but there's a painful scene where he has an extended conversation with a man he suspects to be Howe, in which you can't really understand what either man is saying to the other. Maybe that's what's so funny about the scene, but that, like some of the other dialogue-heavy sequences, could have been exercised from the film to improve the overall pacing. Watching the film with an audience, and I use that term loosely because there were literally 5 other guys in the theater with me, might have hindered my initial reaction to the film. It was strange because we were all laughing at different places, and there were scenes which I found terrifying that the 20-year-olds behind me found hysterical. That's the overall power this movie has. I have no idea what it was intended to be. You really can't categorize it. It isn't a comedy, but it has some really funny moments. And while it fits more comfortably into the horror genre, there's no subcategory for this. It isn't even what some would deem a horror comedy because I couldn't tell if the humor was incidental or if Smith was truly trying to ease the tension by getting us to laugh. I guess the idea of this film is so ridiculous that you have to laugh. It's hard to take serious when you talk about the film's premise, but when it gets you there, it's truly terrifying. Either way, I'd be lying if I didn't say it wasn't enjoyable. In fact, I kind of want to see it again because it's so bizarre. And you know what? That's the mark of a really good movie.